Once again, I mean, this is huge. So we're going to be looking at treating 400 heroin addicts at Swinomish. Not $1 from the local, the county, the state, or the federal government. We did this in less than a year. From going from 0 to having over 30 professionals under our roof. And it's very unique heroin treatment centered by the fact that we provide daycare, we provide free transportation, and we provide a free medical doctor on site for a heroin addict to get a checkup. We have our counselors, our drug counselors, we have our mental health counselors. So we have over 30 bodies under this one roof. And once again, getting back to your question, you know, that's so important. Education, drug and alcohol abuse, graduation rate, unemployment, just getting all those negative statistics and lowering them. So that's across the spectrum. Yes?
So that's a great example of kind of beating down the generational trauma and also the stereotypes that a lot of Americans have about Native Americans. How do you tell a story like that? Within your community, to the broader community, the county, politicians, like, can you just take us inside of the last couple of years and that program very quickly evolved, but like, how do you share that success?
So the local mayor, Anacortes, is the closest city, biggest, they're the richest city in the county. So the mayor came in 3 years ago with her big platform destroying heroin abuse in my community. She was not able to do much in 3 years. And in 1 year, we were able to do this in her backyard for her. And she was just like, man, just loving it, because it was not a drain on her budget. She didn't have to pay anybody to do it, and we did it. The Skagit County Commissioner, and the genesis of this problem at Swinomish is prescription drugs. 90+% of our addicts started with OxyContin because we had a doctor that was prescribing it like candy and getting kickbacks for doing it. I just get so frustrated with Big Pharma. Right now, that family is worth $16 billion in a 10-year period because of the sale of OxyContin in the U.S. They're getting their butts sued right now, and I want the tribes to get in on that lawsuit also, because that was the genesis of the Swinomish problem and many of the tribal. We never had a heroin problem, ever. Never did, until OxyContin showed up. So a county commissioner, good friend of mine, her son become addicted to OxyContin, then heroin, and she told me last year, Brian, my worst fear is to walk in and find my son dead. She walked in and found her son dead. So they know our story. The mayor came and spoke at our grand opening. The county commissioner came and spoke at our grand opening. Unfortunately, the governor was out of the nation, or he would have been there, and also the attorney general. And so just collectively bringing those voices and bringing them in and helping them tell our story is very, very important. And Billy Frank Jr., one of my greatest role models, always told me, tell your story, tell your story, tell your story. And that was my repetitive model this morning. You got to keep telling your story over and over. Never get tired of telling your story. It's a great story. Yes?
So you talked about the constructive relationship you had with the Obama administration. I'm wondering, at a high level, is the best thing the federal government can do for Native Americans to really provide some resources and then get out of the way?
Yes, that self-governance, and you know, we always hear this all the time about how much federal aid the tribes get, and I really wish we set up a mechanism when we sign the treaties that says we're going to give you this land, but we get at least 10% of all the resources and taxes made off this land. That would have been the greatest stimulus program ever for Indian country, and we probably wouldn't be having this discussion because we would have this investment at our footsteps. But self-governance, so in 1988 they started the self-governance program. It was a pilot project in the U.S. with 8 tribes, mostly in the Northwest. And so basically what that did is that allowed tribes for the first time, and I remember in '85 when I got on the council, I went down to the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, we jokingly call it Boss Indians around. And I went down there as a strapping young 25-year-old, and I remember sitting there, and the head of the BIA was telling all the tribes in his region how they were going to spend their money this year. They had it all figured out. They had it all broke down. You're going to spend your money here, 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 here. By 1988, we started a self-governance demonstration project. And right now, from 1988 to now, we went from 8 tribes to almost 400 tribes that do what they call compacting with the BIA and the IHS. So basically, they get one large sum, and they determine what they're going to spend their money on. And it's worked very successfully for us because since about 1993, when we joined self-governance, we've been able to build a multi-million-dollar dental clinic and a multi-million-dollar health clinic, spending the money the way we wanted to spend it. And so, yeah, it'd be nice if we could just get rid of all that recording. And we're trying to extend the self-governance compacting to other agencies like EPA or DOJ or those ones, because IHS and BIA has been very successful for a lot of tribes.
Can you talk about, as a higher level, being as the president of National Congress of American Indians, challenges, even successes you had to try to coordinate over 200 tribes, maybe some of those aren't members of NCDI, to come together in Washington and have like that 15-minute sit down with the president, or walk into Tom Cole's office, or Don Young, or Al Franken, or whoever it was that was, either a friend or a foe, or to get all the agenda set, to coordinate all these tribal leaders, that challenge, then to talk to the folks in Washington who make the decisions and come back and roll some things out. So how was that, describe that experience to us, as trying to get that, be a national advocate of that?
Some issues are like herding cats, and other issues, it's a no-brainer, where we walk into the room as one. It, once again, all depends on the issue we are talking about. For example, I guess natural resource development is a herding cats one. That's a tough one. That's a very, very tough one. Only by the fact that, I'll give you my example with the Crow's example, where Joe lives. So the Crow are sitting on a very, very huge stockpile of coal. And Joe knows the Crow better than anybody in this room, and he knows the challenges they have with economic development, location, and everything. So the coal to them is very important. I can understand that. And so they partnered with a group called SSA. I can't think of their name right now. They were going to develop the largest coal exporting port in the world 30 miles from my reservation. So we fought it, and it was a big issue at the national level on natural resources because we weren't all united on this endeavor. So you had the Navajo, you had the Crow, and you had the other tribes that have large, vast coal resources. And so in our neck of the woods, you have the Lummi, you have the Swinomish, the Swinomish, very, very large fishing communities. So my community, 900 members, we probably have about 150 to 200 tribal members that produce about $8 million a year in fishing income. 8 million. So this is off everything from gooey duck to clams, to crabs, to seafood, to salmon, you name it, sea cucumbers, they go and harvest all that. And so this coal exporting company wanted to come to our backyard and start exporting coal, which we thought was going to poison our waters, poison our clam beds, poison our fish. And so we fought it. So that was a big issue nationally. And we had congressmen and senators on both sides of the aisle getting involved in this because they were looking at creating jobs. They were looking at the coal industry needed our help. Da 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 da. So that was a big one. At the end of the day, the Corps of Engineers, and we're so very, very thankful that it was during the Obama administration, the Corps of Engineers cited treaty rights as a reason for stopping this project. And in the Pacific Northwest, 6 years ago, there were 6 projects in the Northwest that were 6 ports that were going to export coal. We were going to be the exporting hub of the world. And in 6 years, our tribes in the Northwest killed all 6 projects. All 6 projects. And we used treaty rights as our tool. And thank God it happened under the Obama administration. I think things would be a little different today under the Trump administration. And so that was a good example. Bears Ears, another example of us coming together and fighting together. Bears Ears is a national monument in Utah that the Obama administration designated, and the Trump administration just came in and totally just like wiped the entire thing off the designation out. So that's a good example of us coming together and working together. Yes.
Can you say something about the economic regulations in Swinomish Indian tribal community? So you mentioned that you have some businesses running fish, business about fish and some small casino and dental clinic and stuff like that. And also, how do you appropriate that income? How do you divide that income amongst the community members?
Sure, that's a good question. And so at Swinomish, we have about 1,000 members. And when I was growing up at Swinomish in the 60s, we had 5 employees at Swinomish. By the time I graduated in 1977, we had 40 employees. Now we have 1,000. Almost 1,000 employees at Swinomish. It's crazy. Adding this heroin treatment center got us really close to 1,000 jobs. And so we set up our model kind of like the way Joe talked about earlier. We separated it out from the council. And one of the things that stuck in my mind more than anything when I went to that first tribal leadership training 21 years ago was a compilation of data they did on why businesses fail in Indian country. It just burned in my mind. Why do businesses fail in Indian country? Anybody in here know? Micromanagement by the tribal council. Number one reason businesses fail in Indian country. These tribal leaders get on tribal council and they think they got a PhD to run everything. And they don't know a damn thing about running businesses. So getting back to your question. So we've set up the Swinomish Development Authority. So at Swinomish, and so we lease a lot of land, and so that's a big income producer. We lease land to that big housing development. We lease land to a timber company who uses it to store their logs. We lease land to, and this was very unique, 1,000 Trails. It's a NACO camping ground on the northwest, in the west coast. And that's a really interesting story. Our first planner at Swinomish, he went to work for 1,000 Trails, and they wanted to build a campgrounds at Swinomish, about a 400-acre campground. And so what this guy did is he talked 1,000 Trails into buying this land, getting the tribe to zone it for this campground, and then they turned around and gift deeded that land to the tribe. They gave all 100% of it back to the tribe. And then on top of that, they gave us a 6-figure lease every year. On top of that, very unique. Very unique. So not only did we get the land back, but we got a guaranteed income stream every year. And so we have what's called the Swinomish Development Authority that oversees our fish plant operation, it oversees our gas station, it oversees our golf course. We're going to get in the marijuana business really soon. Our compact is just about ready, and so we'll be selling marijuana. And that's going to, so we've never ever looked at our services as for-profit ever. We always provided health care as a service, never as for-profit. And so this heroin treatment center, we put it under our development authority and not under our health. And that was an interesting debate internally. Well, that's crazy. You need it under the health committee. It doesn't belong under the development authority. And at the end, the council went with the development authority for the one reason is that we're going to manage this as a for-profit operation. And the numbers show that we will be producing anywhere from 5 to 10 million a year treating heroin addicts. That's huge for Swinomish. That's a lot of money. And if the projections come in, it's going to be like, wow. And so, you know, we've once again, I'm a firm believer in don't recreate the wheel. And so we've brought in a lot of models that other tribes were using. We even looked at the models that the state was using to incorporate in how we manage our affairs. And so, yeah.
How do you divide the money? You know, what do? Do you have a per
Oh
capita?
yeah,
So forth?
the money. So we don't have a per capita. And thank God, we're not big enough for a per capita. Some tribes are, we're not. And so our casino makes about 15 million a year. Our sister tribe 30 minutes from us, on their Christmas distribution this year, they gave 25 million in one day to their tribal members. 25 million in one day. They've got 4,700 tribal members, and each of them got $5,300 for a Christmas per cap. And so it's really hard for us at Swinomish when we have a tribe 30 minutes away giving away that kind of money, and your tribal members are saying, what about us? Where's ours? Yeah. So the way we have defined per capita at Swinomish is we provided 1,000 jobs, get educated and get a job. That's your per capita. You got to work for it. I've never been a firm believer, and I use this term loosely because some tribal leaders don't like to hear the term welfare. I've seen and I've lived through the failed policies of the welfare program of the U.S. government. I was a product of a welfare child, growing up very, 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 very poor, and seeing my parents receive a check once a month from the federal government. It took a very proud people and just diminished them. It's like more of stealing that soul from them as being, you know, providers and yeah. So that's how we distribute our money. So at Swinomish you get a free education. So that's how we distribute it. At Swinomish, all the kids get free braces. At Swinomish, all elders get free hearing aids. At Swinomish, every tribal member gets free glasses every year. Our kids, going to school that first day is so important. Self-esteem. We give every kid back to school money so their parents can go have new clothes for them that first day of school because self-esteem is so important. At Christmas, every tribal member gets $750. So that's how we roll.
I've never asked you this question. At a personal level, why did you decide to take on the job at NCAI? You know, what were you thinking, man?
So, you know, you just don't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be president of NCAI. It doesn't work that way. And so, you know, chairman for 21 years. I was the president of an organization out west, the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians. And so it represents about 60 tribes in about 5 or 6 western states out there. And so when I stepped down in 2011 as president of NCAI, 2011 they wanted me to run in Portland. So not only, you know, other people seen in me. When I first became chairman 21 years ago, my general manager told me, Nick Zafrados, one day you're going to be president of NCAI. So it's that people see something in you that you don't see when you look in the mirror. And so I guess it was just a lot of grooming by my elders, a lot of support from my community, and a very reluctant wife. She was the one that I had to crack the hardest because she knew the commitment. And Ron Allen, he tried to discourage me only because I think he wanted to run for president.
This is another tribal chair nearby.
So Ron Allen is my role model. He's in the second largest. So it was a tough decision in 2013 to do. And so I had to go to Oklahoma to become elected as president of NCAI. And so I had the current vice president running. I had the former president, a very, very popular man running against me, Joe Garcia. I had the chairman of the tribe that sponsored the conference in Oklahoma from Muskogee was running, and then me. A little unknown from the Northwest, even though people had seen me around a lot. And the year before, introducing the President of the United States at the Tribal Leaders Conference probably helped out a little bit too and elevated my exposure. And so going down to Oklahoma, I didn't have high expectations because of the competition and because of it being down there. At the end of the day, there was almost 20,000 votes cast, and we won by 25. So that's the difference of one tribe. One tribe. And so, I don't know, Joe, I just felt inside of me this is something I wanted to do. And in 4 years, I put almost 500,000 air miles in, traveling to every corner of Indian country. 2 years ago, I did 135,000 air miles. Last year, since it was my last year, I slacked off and I only did about 85,000 air miles. And so it was a big commitment. My council supported me 100%. In fact, they budgeted an extra 100,000 in the budget for my travels all over to be able to do this.
You get to keep those frequent flyer miles?
Yes. So my family, luckily nobody got hurt, but my family was involved in an accident in Sacramento. There were 7 of them going to Phoenix this last summer. And so I had to use frequent flyer miles to fly 7 of my family members home from Sacramento. So I see another hand right here.
How do you remain chairman for 20 years?
So,
And why?
good question. So Swinomish is very small. Everybody knows everybody. We live within a 1 to 2 mile radius, probably 80% of us. So everybody knows everybody. And just as chairman, I have to be elected every single year. Every year. And so I'm elected by my 11 council members every year. So my people know me. My council knows me, they know my commitment, and they just have the faith in my ability to lead, and it's only by the grace of God do I have the greatest job in the world, and I firmly believe I have the greatest job in the world when I see results and when I see things happening. So I think just to be able to, and so I've got this perspective that is totally different from the non-Indian world, and the fact that I tell people I did not make it to the top. I did not make it to the top. I did not. I did not climb that ladder of success. I did not make it to the top. I made it to the bottom. And people are like, what are you talking about? You made it to the bottom. I made it to the bottom. And this is a total different perspective from the non-Indian world. In our part of the country, we have totem poles. And we're told that the person at the bottom of that totem pole is the most important because he's holding everybody up. I started at the top as a child. We look at our children and our elders as being at the top of that totem pole, and we as our leaders have to hold them up. And so I started at the top as a child, and I made my way down to the bottom, and now it's me holding up my people. I'm a servant. If you've seen me in action at Swinomish, you would know why I've been chairman for 21 years, and you would know why my people support me wholeheartedly. Not 100%. Who gets 100%? But that's what I tell people. I made it to the bottom, man. I'm holding my people up. Yes. I see Joe and Megan walking around, so I got a couple more stories that I want to get in. Go ahead.
So I'm really interested actually in your kind of attention to storytelling and how important it is to be able to share your story and have people hear your story. So I'm curious for you, as we think about kind of cycling out of more and more historical trauma, what are the kinds of stories you hope your grandkids can tell future generations?
Number one, that they would be able to talk about historical trauma from its true perspective. That even though my grandkids are not living through historical trauma like I did and my wife did, but to be able to tell the story about historical trauma. You know, very few people know the genesis. Very few people know that 8 years after Columbus was lost and he landed and he met the Arawaks, 8 years later he was sent back to Europe in chains. How many of you knew that? I see two hands. Christopher Columbus was sent back in chains by his brother. How many of you know De las Casas? De las Casas was the priest that was with Columbus. And in his journal he says, "My hand shakes at the atrocities that I am witnessing by these men against these natives. My hand shakes." They were cutting men in half who were not getting enough gold. They were cutting men's hands off and watching them bleed to death. They were feeding the dead bodies to their dogs. They were raping women. They had no women with them. Your history books will not tell you that sad story because history is whitewashed. They will not tell you that story, that Christopher Columbus was sent back in shackles. And here we have a day for this butcher, this genocidal maniac, who in 8 years destroyed what he called utopia. He couldn't believe the people that he encountered. They were giving him, they were handing him stuff. Giving him stuff. Within 8 years he was heading back. And the king and queen loved him so much they pardoned him when he got back. He didn't have to pay for his crimes, and that was just the start. So I would like my kids to know that history. I'd like them to know the genesis of it. I'd like them to know what the boarding school experience was really like from my grandfather, and tell that story. One last one. I have a bunch more here, but one last one. I see my... So, the American Dental Association. Anybody know anything about the American Dental Association? Does anybody know they're the strongest lobby in the U.S.? So, Alaska. Do we have any Alaskans in here? So about 10 years ago, Alaska started. How many of you know about dental health aid therapist? Dental health aid therapist. So a dental health aid therapist is like a physician's assistant. So a physician's assistant came into being in 1964, and who fought them the most to get them recognized? The American Medical Association. So who fought the hardest to get DHATs recognized in Alaska? The American Dental Association. So in Alaska 10 years ago, so the Alaskans have a very unique problem where they have no access to dental care in the remotest of villages. And so New Zealand started a DHAT program almost 100 years ago. They're the genesis of the program, and DHATs practice in almost 75 countries around the world except the U.S. because of the American Dental Association. And so about 5 years ago, I went back to Washington, D.C. by the invite of Kellogg to meet these DHATs from Alaska, dental health aid therapists, all native, 100% native. 25 of them went to New Zealand for 2 years to be trained, and it's a 2-year boot camp where you spend 2 years straight, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, learning how to become a dental therapist. And a dentist has to be trained in almost 600 procedures while they go to school. A DHAT is trained in 40 procedures over a 2-year period. And so that is filling, drilling, and minor extractions. And so Alaska needed this for their people. And so they sent their kids to New Zealand. They came back, and the American Dental Association sued all the corporations, sued the villages, and sued all 25 of those kids in court. And so they settled out of court. But 5 years ago, I went back to DC to learn about this program, and I came away thinking every community in the U.S. needs this. Every community, not just Indian community, every community needs a DHAT. I was just so hook, line, and sinker. And so I went home and I told my staff, get me a DHAT. They says, well, it's not that easy. In 2010, when Obamacare was passed, they also passed the Indian Health Care Improvement Act forever. So over a 17-year period, we could not get Congress to pass our Indian Health Care Improvement Act. Not once in 17 years. And so the president and his allies took it upon themselves to have the Indian Health Care Improvement Act married to Obamacare, and so it's passed forever, so we never have to fight in Congress to get it passed again. But one thing that we did not know happened, our friends in DC allowed the American Dental Association at 11:59 before this was passed to insert one sentence in there that says, if any tribe in the lower 48 wanted a DHAT program, they'd have to go to their state legislature for approval. That's that paternalistic attitude. Got to go to the great white father to get permission. And I use the term great white father because that's what Governor Isaac Stevens said in our treaty. We're going to take this document back to the great white father and he's going to take care of you. So I like using that term great white father. In 1855, they didn't know President Obama was going to be the president. So we start going to Olympia, to our friends in Olympia, to get this DHAT bill passed. I thought, no brainer, easy stuff. The American Dental Association bought every single politician in Olympia, Republican and Democrat. And they hired a half a dozen lobbyists. Like, whoa, man, really? And these people were amazing. They were at all costs kill DHAT. And so after 2 years of going to Olympia to ask for permission, I told my team, forget that, screw them, get me DHAT at Swinomish. And so last year, in 2016, in January, Swinomish became the first tribe in the lower 48 without the permission of the state, without the permission of the feds, to start a DHAT program, and we hired our own DHAT program, and we told our dentist that potentially you could lose your license because of this action, and that was very hard for my dentist to make that decision, but we did it. And so in 2016, we started our own DHAT, and once again in 2016, the American Dental Association in 12 states across the nation, mostly with tribal members in them, killed every bill in the state legislature in 2016. And so in 2017, they seen the writing on the wall. The camel's nose was under the tent. We operated a very successful, and this was, so I went and spoke, the Congressional Black Caucus last year had a gathering in DC dealing with dental health disparities for people of color. And so they invited me to speak, and this was dentists in the American Dental Association, and I didn't hold back. I mean, I have no love for the American Dental Association. And I didn't hold back. And I challenged them. I said, the first thing I said is, in the last 10 years, how many people have died in a dental chair? You don't ask that question to dentists. I just read the story of the 6-year-old whose parents, the EMTs come rushing in, they didn't know what was going on, then coming out was their son on a stretcher. That's the last time they seen him alive. And I asked them, because this is what we heard, you don't need a therapist. They provide inferior care, you're going to have liability insurance and people are going to die, and you're going to have all kinds of claims against you. This was their lies. And so I challenged them, I says, Google how many people have died at the hands of a dentist in the last 10 years. Now Google how many people died at the hands of therapists in Alaska in the last 10 years. They knew the answer. And I said, how many liability claims against dentists in the last 10 years? Then I challenged them, how many liability claims against a dental therapist in Alaska the last 10 years? 0. So I've got $1 million policy for my dental health aid therapist at Swinomish. We pay $89 a year for a $1 million policy for our DHAT because Alaska in the last 10 years proved it is almost 100% safe. And so little old Swinomish took on the ADA and we won. And my goal is to get, yes, and sovereignty one step further. We don't go to the state for a license. We license every professional at Swinomish. We have our own licensing board. We have professionals from around the state, dentists. Not only that, we have elders, and we have a tribal leader on that board because you have to have a cultural competency component of your test in order to get a license. Now it gets better. So we have 10 kids in Alaska right now going, I left that out, so you don't have to go to New Zealand anymore. So the University of Washington teamed with the University of Anchorage to have the training in Alaska, so our kids go to Alaska. So the ADA found out what the University of Washington was doing, so they went to the dean of the dental school and says, if you partner with Anchorage, we're not going to give you a penny in funding, and almost probably 80 or 90% of the outside funding for the Washington Dental School, the UW Dental School, comes from the American Dental Association. And so the president of the University of Washington says, well, if you want to play that game, we will not partner with Anchorage through our dental program. We'll use our medical program and you can't touch us. So that's what they did. And so right now, Swinomish is partnering with a local college. So next fall, they're going to be training our kids in Washington, 10 miles from Swinomish. We're expanding our dental clinic from 5 to 15 chairs, so when these kids graduate from this college, they'll come to Swinomish for their internship. And once they finish their internship, and they can go practice anywhere in Indian country in the nation, we license them. They don't have to get a license from any state that they're practicing in. They get it from us. And so, you know, the IHS this year had Dental Disparity Conference in DC, and I had to kick and fight and scratch to get into this conference, put on by the IHS in Washington, DC. And when I get there, I'm the only leader where we have all these mostly white guys talking about how they're going to deal with dental disparities. And this just happened. And I got up, and once again, didn't hold back. I said, your opening statement has to be, IHS has failed Indian country when it comes to dental care. Number one. Number two, the American Dental Association is the biggest stumbling block and one of the best known successes for dealing with dental care in Indian country. And after I got done speaking, Stacy Boland, who runs the National Indian Health Board, she spoke after me, and after that, the person that was running the meeting got up and says, I would appreciate it if you kept your comments to a minimum, and please ask only a question in reference to what the speaker is talking about. And what that meant to us is you Indians sit down and shut up and listen. That was the message we received when he said that. It gets better. The next day I show up, so the ADA's governmental affairs person's in the meeting. The next day, the vice president of the National American Dental Association shows up to the meeting. And I got word that the IHS called the ADA and apologized for the president of NCAI talking smack about the ADA. So the vice president had to show up the next day. And I got in his face. And I told him, I said, how many millions of dollars have you spent the last 10 years trying to defeat the DHAT program across the nation? How much? I said, if you would have put that into scholarships for our kids to attend Alaska, that would have went a lot further than paying lobbyists. They hired 12 lobbyists in Texas, to kill the bill. There's 2 tribes in Texas. Ay, 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 Joe, it's 20 to 3. I'm only halfway through.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that and will join me in thanking. Thank you.